Segment 0.1. Gimel. Explanation. Consonants. Part 1. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, and Dalet. From that listing you can see that Gimel in the title is the third letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So if the heading sections were listed in English, it would be 0.1.C. In this particular segment, it will be easiest to follow if we simply read through some of the sentences. That way you can correlate the sounds that are being produced as you read along on the page. So let's begin. The first four letters of the Hebrew alphabet are Aleph, Beit, Gimel, and Dalet. Now let's pause a moment and notice how the English is representing these Hebrew consonant names. In Aleph, you'll notice that there is a small semicircle before the A of Aleph, and that is the formal representation of this Hebrew consonant, Aleph. The English representation of the letter name Beit is written B with an E having an overstrike, and then T. E with an overstrike, that is a raised horizontal line, represents the sound A, as if it were AY. This is explained in the second paragraph. Beit. It is not pronounced beat, as you might have supposed from other phonetic representations. But here in Hebrew transliteration, the letter E with a horizontal line above it produces the A sound. The third letter, Gimel, is written G, and then I, and then there is an angular sign above the letter I. This, together with any other letter I in transliteration, is pronounced with the E sound. So this is Gimel, not Gimel. Gimel. The transliteration of the letter name Dalet is fairly straightforward. Concerning the letter Beit, if you follow the footnote that's associated with Beit in that first sentence, you will see the comment that sometimes the letter Beit is represented with a dot in its center, known as a dagesh. This is the technical representation for the letter name Beit, whereas if the dot is omitted, it's pronounced with a V sound, Veit, Veit. Now these are the technical distinctions, and they will be very important when reading Standard Hebrew. However, when simply listing out the letters of the alphabet, it's conventional to issue the second letter, Beit, and simplify it, leaving out that dagesh dot. The third paragraph on this page that begins the vowel I, we've already commented that this I in transliteration is pronounced E as a long E. Another letter name, one of the last in the alphabet, is Shin. It also uses this long I transliteration. Incidentally, in the letter Shin, you will find an inverted angular sign above the S, and this is the symbol for an SH sound. Shin. S with the inverted angle. Please pay particular attention to the last paragraph on this page. It indicates that towards the close of Unit 0, there are some valuable hints concerning how to write these Hebrew letters. It will be important to develop good habits of penmanship so that what you write will be easily recognized by people who need to read your work. Here's the portion of Unit 0 that will give you some guidance for handwriting of the Hebrew consonants. How to write Hebrew letters. In the far right, you'll find the standard font that's used in this textbook. The second column will give you a handwritten form of that same letter. You will find that it's slightly simplified over against the professional font. And then to the left of the handwritten, again, a professional font has been broken down into the stroke sequence. This font is slightly different than the customary font that you'll find in this textbook, but it's close enough that you should be able to recognize it. Let's begin with the Aleph letter. Your first stroke should be the diagonal stroke, beginning in the upper left and proceeding to the lower right. The second stroke will be a slightly hooked stroke that will begin in the upper right and then reach downward, connecting a little below the center zone of the larger diagonal stroke. Finish with a third stroke that takes off from the longer diagonal stroke a little above or left of the center of that longer diagonal stroke, and then it will reach down with a bit of a hook towards the baseline. Practice this several times. It's best to not use an X symbol, although it's tempting to simplify the letter Aleph with an X. Rather, use these 3 steps, and you will produce a more legible representation of the Aleph letter. The small tags at the end of the offset hooks are not needed, as you can see in the handwritten version. You can produce these side wings rather simply. And now for the letter Beit. Here it is shown with the dagesh dot. The first stroke you want to make begins in the upper left. Draw it across horizontally, and then at right angles, draw it downwards towards the baseline. Complete the letter by drawing the baseline again from left to right. Finally, add the dot for the dagesh if it's the letter Beit, or leave the dot out if it's the letter Veit. The far left column presents a circled feature which is very critical to notice. The baseline, as you'll see the note beneath these letters, the baseline must extend to the right past the vertical line. If you do not, if instead you have a clean junction in that lower right corner with no extension of the baseline to the right, this letter will be confused for a different letter, the letter Kaf. Practice writing the letter Beit a few times. The letter Gimel is narrower, about half of the width of the letter Beit. It begins in similar fashion, upper left with a stroke to the right, and then downward. The downward stroke, however, at about the last 25%, it will angle, forming a leg slightly to the right. The last completing stroke for the letter Gimel will produce a matching left angle leg for this letter, just as you see depicted. Once again, the Gimel must be narrower than the Beit letter, about half the width of it, and the base must form this fork. Dalet is the last letter that we'll describe for the penmanship at this point. Like the letter Beit, it begins in the upper left with a horizontal stroke. There's one more stroke. The second stroke will be vertical. It must be inset on the right. That is to say, the horizontal stroke must extend to the right beyond the vertical stroke. If you do not, if you make a clean corner with no overstrike, then it will be mistaken for a different consonant, the consonant Resh. The overall dimension of the letter Dalet will be the same as the letter Beit. It will be twice as wide as the letter Gimel. as you learn to say the letters and as you learn to recognize them, at the same time periodically turn back to the end of Unit 0 and be sure that your writing style is developing accuracy. Here's the entire Hebrew alphabet, the consonants. We'll be concentrating in this section on the first 4. However, since these are all presented here, let's go ahead and read down the list of the Hebrew consonants. Aleph, Beit, or without the dagesh dot, Veit, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, or without the dagesh dot, Chaf. And now the second column, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pe, or without the dagesh, Fe. Tzadi, Chof, Resh, Shin, Sin, Tav. The first letter, Aleph, is actually a consonant. It goes by the formal term a glottal stop, meaning a stop produced in the back of the tongue area. However, it does not correspond to a single Latin letter. Instead, we find ourselves producing this glottal stop automatically if we simply pronounce whatever Hebrew vowel immediately follows the letter Aleph. So, for example, Aleph, followed by a kametz vowel, produces the sound ah, and in order to begin that, you'll notice a constriction in the back of your throat, ah. Or if we produce the word Aleph kametz beit, pronounced av. Once again, we must begin with a slight constriction of the air in the back of the throat, av. We can see this in a second syllable in the word consisting of the letters beit, kametz vowel, aleph, and then a patach vowel. This is pronounced ba-ah. Notice that the second syllable begins with a constriction, ba-ah. The last footnote on this page explains this a bit further. Contrast, for example, the English word at in contrast to the English word hat. The word at requires a constriction before saying it, whereas the word hat begins with a smooth breathing of the letter H. In the words it and ought, both of these require a constriction before beginning the word, in contrast to the similar sounding words hit or hot. These begin with H and there is a smooth breath, expulsion of breath, not a constriction. Where there is a constriction, Hebrew would represent that sound with an aleph. It's a good idea to read the other footnotes on this page. They will help you develop sound pronunciation habits as well.